This is the Highly Sensitive Club, episode number 14.
Have you been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much? Do you have big feelings and deep thoughts you don't always know what to do with? I'm Stephanie Lynn, a certified life coach and highly sensitive person. I've helped dozens of highly sensitive clients feel more energized, more confident, and more in control of their high sensitivity. In these episodes, you'll get the information and inspiration to level up your life as a highly sensitive person too. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Club.
Hello there, highly sensitive person, and welcome to this week's episode of the Highly Sensitive Club. I am finishing up my series this week on the common highly sensitive person problems, and we're talking about overwhelm this week. Now, in full disclosure, last week was how to break free from imposter syndrome, and I shared some very personal, vulnerable information. And I have to say, at 4:30 in the morning, which was 2.5 hours before the episode was supposed to air, it was scheduled to go out on YouTube and on all of my podcasting sites. I had a thought, like, I could take that down. I don't actually need to publish that. I don't have to share all of those vulnerable things. And I decided to do step 3 of my own process and to just deal with the discomfort, to lean into it because it was something I really wanted to do. And I want to thank all of you who reached out and said that it was really inspiring and you were so encouraging and so thoughtful. And I was surprised that that was the episode where so many people actually contacted me and wanted to learn more and wanted to start a conversation and start connecting with each other. So that was really, really cool. And it just goes to show that when you drop your imposter syndrome masks and you let yourself be the person that you are, that is where real connection comes from. So this week we are talking about how to break free from overwhelm. And a lot of highly sensitive people have this problem because they feel uncomfortable being in the world. I hear this phrase all the time. How do I be in the world without feeling overwhelmed? And what this comes down to in the highly sensitive jargon, technical speak, is called overstimulation, which is when you have so much sensory input that it causes feelings of overload or overwhelm. And the operative word is excessive. Excessive sensory input causes that overstimulation and that overwhelm. And we get this from the outside world, and we get this from our thoughts and our interior world as well. We can absolutely overstimulate ourselves. So some of the common ways that this shows up for highly sensitive people like us is in crowded places. So maybe you love sporting events or you love concerts, but you have to take those in very small doses because crowds are very overwhelming for you. It might be that prolonged events create some overstimulation and some overwhelm for you, whether that's a weekend conference or whether it's a weekend visit with family or with friends or an extended travel period where you have a lot of things scheduled instead of enough downtime. That can cause a lot of overstimulation and overwhelm as well. Having too much physical stimulus. So when you walk into places where there's a lot of visual activity, a lot of auditory activity, where there's a lot of people around, where you're getting like the vibe of things and your empathy is picking up on all of these emotional cues and the vibe from the room, that might be creating some overwhelm for you as well and some overstimulation. That's all the external stuff. Now, as I mentioned, you can also overstimulate yourself internally. And this might be because your emotions feel very intense and they feel like they're escalating and you're not quite sure what to do with it. So you can overstimulate yourself when you're feeling flooded with emotions. And when you have a high information input. And for instance, this happens to me because I love podcasts and I love audiobooks. And I find that if I am consuming too many episodes at one period of time, I start to get this kind of jittery, fluttery feeling, and I can tell that I'm starting to get overstimulated. So if this sounds familiar, if you start to get that that listless kind of uncomfortable feeling, maybe it's a tingly feeling, maybe it's a numbness for you, whatever overwhelm feels like for you, that might be a sign that it's coming up for you. Now, how this shows up in our life is that we, as highly sensitive people, might not spend as much time around others or out and about in the world as we want to, because we're afraid of the emotional input and the external sensory input that might overwhelm us. So it feels a lot easier for us to just stay inside, stay in our nice cozy nest at home, and maybe lean too much on video games or TV or books and things that allow us to escape instead of living our own life. This creates this internal feeling for us that we're very overly protective of our time and our energy, and it encourages us to stay in instead of going out into the world and experiencing things, having novelty, sharing connections with other people, because we're playing it safe and we're staying comfortable. And what this ends up creating for us is a feeling like the world is going on without us and we're on the outside looking in. And it can be a lonely experience. And I think it contributes to why a lot of us highly sensitive people feel like we don't belong or we're not accepted, because we have this constant sense that we're on the outside and the rest of the world is moving on without us. And it feels like we can't keep up. Now, it doesn't have to be this way, because you can learn to handle your high sensitivity, to handle your external input, and to manage your thoughts and your emotions so that you really can handle any situation, even a busy schedule or a really intense social event, and you can still take care of your high sensitivity. You can prepare in advance, you can take care of it later. Anytime you go on a vacation, for instance, if you plan a packing and a preparation day before you leave and then a buffer day when you get home, this is a great way that highly sensitive people find ways to create that space in their schedule so that they don't feel so overwhelmed and overstimulated, especially on things we want to do. Internally, this creates a feeling of confidence. It creates comfort for us, and we can feel connected to the world and to others and to ourselves without feeling like we are one step away from being completely overwhelmed and have to run away. On the outside, too, this creates the result that we can be in the world. We can enjoy everything that the world has to offer, and we can contribute to the world because we deserve to be in it. And our voices and our experiences deserve to be heard as highly sensitive people, because the more we see of each other, the more people we see who are like us, who are doing things that we want to do, the more we start believing that for ourselves. So when you go out into the world, you are being an inspiration and you're being a motivation for other highly sensitive people too, to create the lives that we really want. Now, here are some signs with a very easy framework that I know you can remember that will help you figure out where your stimulation levels lie. So I like to use the green, yellow, red because traffic lights are very easy for people to understand and kind of fit along with these frameworks. So typically, if you go to an event, for instance, or when you start to learn something new, or you're reading a new book, or you're listening to a podcast, it's green when everything's feeling good. You're engaged, you might be in a little bit of a flow state, you feel like you're understanding and comprehending the information that's coming to you, and you probably feel like you're contributing and you're connecting with the people that you're conversing with if you are creating a relationship and if you're being present with other people. Now, the yellow is when you start to get that fluttery feeling, that restlessness, that listlessness. Maybe for you, it starts to feel numb and it might feel like a withdrawal, like you're starting to pull away, and maybe you feel like things are starting to become a little bit more distant from you. Whichever direction this goes, when you start to notice this feeling coming up for you, that's your yellow signal to start slowing down and to think about where you want to go with the overstimulation that it seems like you're kind of about to feel. Now, I have also seen and experienced for sure being in this yellow zone, and then things might start to come out of your mouth that you don't necessarily mean or you wouldn't say when you're in the green zone. So you start making kind of awkward, uncomfortable jokes because you're not sure what to say, or maybe you try to repeat something and you're trying to be funny or you're trying to connect with someone and it just kind of lands flat. This is probably not anything that you did wrong. It's that you're starting to be overstimulated and you're starting to feel overwhelmed, and you either need a break or it might be time to call it a night and just to leave. Now, when you are in the red zone with overstimulation and overwhelm, this is an intense feeling. It feels like your thoughts and your emotions are just going crazy in your head. You might feel a little bit anxious. You might feel paranoid that people are judging you. When you start to judge or when you're judging other people, this is a sign that you are probably overstimulated. And the immediate drive to change the situation, to get out of it, or maybe to snap at someone else, definitely is a signal that you are feeling overstimulated, whether that's emotional, whether it's mental, or whether it's physical. Now, when we have the green, yellow, and red, we can actually start to determine, now that we have a little bit more nuance where we love to be as highly sensitive people, you can start to come up with strategies for yourself. If you're in the green zone and you're feeling really good, you probably have done a little bit of preparation, or you can be in the moment and be very present and connected, and you're in good shape. When you start to get into that yellow zone, that's the time when you can start to bring in your boundaries. You can start to put your plans into place. You can start to ask for support or help, or even just take a pause. And when you're in the red, it's probably time to exit the situation, and you can do that gracefully. Now, when we start getting overstimulated and overwhelmed, I'm sure you have heard of fight or flight. We get that immediate threat response where we feel like we have to do something. We either have to fight, which might mean snapping at others or picking a fight, a verbal fight, maybe a physical fight, although I don't know a highly sensitive person who would start a physical fight. But it's that urge to be a little bit more aggressive, which might even show up as defensiveness, where you feel like you need to engage with someone in this very active way. You might be butting heads. If it's a flight response, you might be feeling like, I need to get out of here immediately. I don't want this anymore. I'm going to withdraw. I need to flee. Now, two other responses, threat responses that have recently come to light in the last, I would say 10 years are freeze and fawn. So the freeze response, typically in a trauma context, is when someone has had so much stimulation or so much trauma that they've learned to just kind of play dead. It's like playing possum. We do this in a social sense, and we do this internally when we start to disengage and we start to dissociate, but we don't actually exit the situation so that we can take care of ourselves. So we just kind of disappear into the crowd, or we disappear into the situation instead of connecting deeper with ourselves and maintaining that level of awareness. And then the fourth one is to fawn, meaning fawn over someone or people please, which again, if you haven't heard the people pleasing episode, is a really good one. And imposter syndrome kind of is a kissing cousin to that one. Fawning is when you start being overly gracious. You start being overly concerned with other people as a way to try to cope with the overwhelm and the overstimulation that's happening. And a lot of times we do that as highly sensitive people because what we really want is for someone else to take care of our emotional well-being. So we think if we're people pleasing them and if we're complimenting them, or if we're maybe being a little bit more, I hate to say it, but a little bit more needy, like, honey, I need you, or I need you to take care of this, then we often create situations where other people can step in and kind of help us regulate our emotions when we don't know how to do that for ourselves. All of these threat responses to overstimulation and overwhelm can be effective, but I think it's better to stop yourself in the yellow zone before you get into this red zone and you start going into fight, flight, freeze, or fawning. Now, which one do you tend to go to automatically? Are you someone who tends to lean in, who takes offense about things when you start to get overstimulated? Do you get defensive? Are you easily offended? Are you someone who tends to just withdraw and you go away? And if you have a hard situation in a social engagement, maybe you're at a party or maybe you're at a concert or something, then you disappear for 3, 4, 5 days, maybe a week or a couple of weeks before anyone hears from you because you feel like you need to recharge from that experience. Maybe you freeze and you feel like you're in constant situations where you don't really like how you're showing up. You don't really know what you want. You're not sure how to be decisive or discerning or to advocate for yourself, but you also aren't exiting so that you can take care of yourself either. And if people pleasing is one of your big responses to that threat response when you're overstimulated, that's a great opportunity to start setting better boundaries with yourself and with others. Now, I imagine, because humans are social creatures, that even as a highly sensitive person, you want some social stimulation, but sometimes you don't always know how to do it. So you might have gone too far in the other direction, where you've decided that being out in the world is just too scary. You can do it in these controlled ways, like going to work or meeting someone out at a restaurant, but just generally being out in the world feels like too much for you. Sometimes that can be helpful because if you are the type of highly sensitive person who recharges internally and you recharge in your nest, in your comfortable space, then that might be a good coping mechanism for you and not something you want to change. But if you would like to be out in the world more, if you would like to share your voice, if you would like to share your opinions and to express who you are and the accomplishments that you're making in your life, then stopping the overwhelm, stopping the overstimulation, and finding different coping mechanisms is going to be really helpful for you. Now, I was one of those people that really, really wanted social stimulation. I always wanted to be part of like a big social group, and I never really went through with it because I discovered that big social groups just had so many dynamics that I didn't know how to navigate in my teens and in my early 20s, and it just felt overwhelming. So it was fun to be around other people who had big social networks so that I could kind of dip into parties or dip into these big social events, but I didn't have to do them regularly. And it was so bad at one point. I was so nested and so overstimulated regularly by my own thoughts and emotions that I was even afraid to leave my house and just go for a walk in my neighborhood, which was very safe. I think I've mentioned this before, but it was just such a high level of anxiety that I had built up over time. And it was like the frog that comes to the boil when it's in the water. The parable of the frog is that when the frog starts out in the water and it's tepid or room temperature, it doesn't notice. But as the heat slowly rises, the frog acclimates to that pressure and it acclimates to the heat and it gets cooked before it even realizes it. Now, this is kind of a gruesome analogy, but it's a good metaphor for our emotional state when we start to get into that stages of overwhelm and overstimulation. And you can't see it if you're listening to this, but if you're watching this on YouTube or on one of the visual podcasting, you can see that I am kind of moving my hands up like a water level rising or like an escalation of sorts, because that's how it feels when our emotions start to get out of our control and it feels like we're getting overwhelmed and overstimulated. However, I can also tell you that I was someone who was afraid to leave my house because I was afraid of other people seeing me and judging me. And now I'm out and about pretty frequently. I have little to no social anxiety because I do it in controlled ways. I show up the way that I want to. I set really good expectations and boundaries in advance. Pretty much anyone who has been to my house recently knows that I want you to leave at 10 p.m. because I will be asleep in my chair at that time. So I want you to come over. I want you to feel welcome. I want you to partake of the tasty stuff I've gotten from the organic shop down the street. And I want us to have fun and play games and have great conversations. And at 10 o'clock, I'm going to fall asleep and I would like you to be out the door on the way. So this is just a simple example of not letting yourself get to that higher stimulation level where you feel like you have a threat response you have to handle. I don't feel guilty about exiting when I'm ready, like the tea shop that I was telling you about a few episodes ago. And another one for me is physical stimulation around caffeine. So for instance, I appreciate a great cup of coffee, but I can only do caffeinated coffee before like 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's a good thing I'm a morning person. But I tend to do decaf and I tend to do decaffeinated tea as well because I am very sensitive to that overstimulation that caffeine gives me as a highly sensitive person. If you have a higher tolerance, that might not be the case for you, but you probably do have a threshold as a highly sensitive person because we tend to be much more susceptible to effects from caffeine, alcohol, and other synthetic materials. Now, you know what the problems are. You know what the symptoms look like. We know what the stages are. Here are the 3 steps that work for me and they work for my clients to help you get out of overwhelm and out of overstimulation so that you can be in the world and you can be at events and be social the way that you want to be without feeling like you're completely overwhelmed. Step 1 is to prepare and plan. And this means a lot of different things. This could mean that you do a little bit of research on the event that you're going to, whether that's a concert, whether it's a party, whether it's some other kind of ticketed event, maybe it's a performance. The more that you know about the event as a highly sensitive person, the better off you're going to be so that you feel comfortable knowing what your options are and knowing approximately what the activity level and what the type of environment is so that you can plan ahead. Am I going to be able to make it through a 4 or 5 hour event if there's a lot of audience interaction or if I have to talk to people the whole time? Or is this something that I'm going to enjoy from my seat in the theater and be able to watch for a few hours and it's not going to overstimulate me and I can enjoy the performance? So being able to get as much information as you can to prepare and plan is really going to help you determine, is this something I have the capacity for or is this something that I need a different plan for? One of the other things that you can do is come up with scripts in the moment for ways that you can gracefully exit, ways that you can ask other people to support your needs for you or to point you in the direction of where you can get support. So I was actually just talking to a client about this earlier, about setting some expectations with people in advance, and you can do this in a really gracious way. So this might look like, how some people have special diets. You might be one of them. And one of the things that you do is to get in touch with the host if you're going to a party, or to check in with a restaurant if you're going somewhere new, and to say, I have these special dietary restrictions. Is there any way you could work with me to help me find something so I can enjoy my evening, but I'm also not, opening myself up to some kind of food reaction? It's the same thing as a highly sensitive person. Reach out to your host. Reach out to the people that you're going to the event with. Reach out to the restaurant or the event space and see if there are quiet spaces where you might be able to retreat for a moment. What's the bathroom situation? Do they just have, a single stall and there's going to be a huge line that you have to contend with? Or do they have lots of different stalls so you can just pop in, take a moment, take a couple deep breaths, maybe text someone on your phone and just check in and have that quiet moment where you can gather yourself. Along those same lines, I also like to look for my quote escape hatches. And escape hatches are ways and places where you can go, where you can just have a quiet moment by yourself. You can check in with a person. So there are people who might be your escape hatches, whether they give you a phone call or a text message, or they might be the people that you're going to the event with, and you can say, I need to have a quiet moment. Do you want to step outside with me? Or would you be willing to go to the bathroom with me and just kind of process this through for a minute? Whatever this looks like for you, think about what your escape plans are, even if that's just taking a couple moments away and coming back. For instance, I know a lot of highly sensitive people feel overstimulated a lot emotionally at weddings or funerals or baby showers or baby christenings. A lot of religious ceremonies might make us feel a certain way. So it's a good idea to be able to say, I know that there are going to be some places and some people who can support me so that I can be here, because that's the ultimate goal, to be present and to be there, but to do it your way. Along those same lines are some shields. These might be some reasons or some explanations that you feel comfortable making in advance. So right now, I feel pretty comfortable saying, I'm highly sensitive. So I'm loving all this loud music. This is really cool, but I'm just going to step outside for a little bit. So I'm going to grab my coat and I'll be right back. That doesn't bother me at all. Or having some other people around to say, it might be time for us to head out. I'm starting to get a little tired. How do you feel? So that you might not feel like you're the only one who's spoiling the party. And then, of course, to set the expectations and warn people ahead of time. Let them know if you plan to leave early. Let them know if you need to take some breaks or if you need to have some time by yourself and then come back and be part of the group. If people know what to expect ahead of time, they're a lot less likely to get curious and to overstimulate you with their questions or their judgments or their opinions. Now, step 2, after you have planned and prepared, is to stay connected and aware in the moment. And that's to stay in that green zone or that yellow zone when you're at the event or when you're somewhere where you might be a little bit overstimulated, and to watch that level rising as it goes so that you know when to take that pause or when to exit. And such as a crazy work environment, for instance, you might need to take a step away and go for a walk at lunch or go somewhere else for lunch instead of staying at the office, so that you actually have an opportunity to get out of that environment and go somewhere else, go somewhere quiet. Highly sensitive people tend to love nature and being outside. So if it's possible for you, maybe you can find a green space so that you can keep track of that. Pay attention to your body sensations. And if you're starting to get that, like for me, that jittery, tingly feeling, like there's a fluttery feeling in my stomach, I'm starting to get kind of a tingly feeling in my hands, and I'm starting to sense that, I'm getting overstimulated. Okay, I either need to pause or walk away or change the situation. I notice this a lot when I'm listening to those podcasts, and I notice that I can usually go 2 or 3 episodes and I'm fine. If I start pushing into 4 or 5 episodes, especially if they're information dense, then I start to get overstimulated, and I can sense it just from the information I'm taking in. So I need to pause. I need to have probably a good half hour to an hour where I'm just sitting in the quiet, or I'm driving in the quiet, or I'm walking in the quiet with my own thoughts. That is crucial. So when you start to get into that yellow zone, that's when you start looking around for the exits, looking for the bathroom, looking for that quiet space, looking for your allies to make sure that you have a place where you can go. And again, when you start to feel judgy, when you start to feel anxious, or when you start saying things you wouldn't normally say and kind of behaving in an unusual way, that's your cue. You're in the yellow zone and you might be getting in that orange zone, closer to the red zone, where you're completely overstimulated and something you don't want to happen is likely to happen. So once you've prepared, once you've paid attention to your cues, and whether you're in the green zone, the yellow zone, or the red zone, number 3 is to take breaks and know when to exit gracefully. So I've mentioned this in the last couple of steps, but you can, depending on how overstimulated you are and what your capacity is to be out in the world right now, which is something you can actually expand. You can practice it. Stepping away to the bathroom for 5 minutes or 10 minutes might be plenty for you to get that little bit of recharge so that you can go back to the table and continue to have that great conversation. Or you can go back to the party and talk to that new person you've never met before. If that's enough for you, that's great. Just having that little pause, stepping out on the balcony, stepping outside for a breath of fresh air, being in some green space, maybe even stepping into a bedroom if it's private and it's quiet might be a good option for you. Breaks might be great. A phone call or a text might be a great SOS. So I know that a lot of us get flack these days for being on our phone and having it glued to our faces, and, the Pokemon Go fad where people were getting injured because they weren't paying attention to the environment around them. Yes, this is possible. And for highly sensitive people, sometimes we can use this in a very strategic way, because a strategic phone call or a strategic text might help us narrow down our focus so that it's small enough that we can kind of put blinders on and we can shut out the overstimulation and the extra sensory input that we're getting from the outside by just focusing on that little square in our hand. Now, I'm not saying you should run away into this. I think that overuse of phones is not good for us highly sensitive people particularly, but if you are using it conscientiously to help narrow your focus so that you can calm your nervous system down, that is a great technique to use. I also will sometimes just close my eyes. So for instance, I was at the BMV in October getting my new registration and my new license. And despite the fact that I went first thing in the morning, 8 a.m., right when they opened, I still had to wait for an hour behind like 50 other people. It was crazy. And I noticed as I was sitting there and I have all my documents lined up that I didn't even need, and I can feel my heartbeat rising up. I can feel this flush coming up in my cheeks. I can feel this constriction going on in my stomach. And I know I'm starting to get overstimulated just by being around so many people in this tight space. And so all I had to do was just sit back and close my eyes. And I could feel everything slowing down. My heartbeat slowed down, my breath slowed down, everything just calmed down. The majority of the population is a visual learner. So if you are among the majority, just closing your eyes for a little bit and taking a couple deep breaths might be exactly what you need to take that little break to calm down your nervous system so that you can take in that input again. And if you are already in the red zone, or if you can tell that you're coming up on your capacity, make your goodbyes. Make them graciously. Tell people how much you appreciated connecting with them and really focus on the positive parts of your social interactions. And no one is going to mind that you left a little bit early. In fact, most people who know you, especially if you set the expectation in advance, are probably going to be completely fine and accepting, and they're going to expect that you want to leave a little bit early. So as you make your gracious goodbyes, that is the moment when you can start to calm down, you get that nice space, and you can get immediately out of the red zone before you snap at someone or internalize it and make it mean something about you, say something you regret, behave in a way that you don't mean to because you're feeling overwhelmed and because you're feeling overstimulated. When you have a plan, when you stay present, and when you dip in and out of the event so that you can keep your energy stable and even, that's how you exist in the world with your high sensitivity. And you learn to be in the world and to be part of it without avoiding it or overdoing it and going to either one of those extremes. Now, if something comes up that normally overstimulates you, whether that's a crowded event, whether it's your job, if you have something very overstimulating happening on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a party, whatever it is, hiding out from the world and playing small keeps you from experiencing the full breadth of the world that you want to experience as a highly sensitive person, that input that you crave, that helps you come up with new ideas and be more creative and make deeper connections. So you can continue to hide from the world, play small, keep yourself from feeling the things that you want to feel, or you can learn to work with your high sensitivity, create plans and structures and prepare for ways that you can protect yourself and your energy when you start to feel overstimulated, because your nervous system is more sensitive than others. That's just a fact. You can be in the world in a way that works for you, that gives you novelty and experiences you want without overwhelming you. Now, just a quick recap. We know that the problem with high sensitivity is that we tend to keep ourselves away from the world. We tend to separate ourselves because we're afraid to be overstimulated. We might have a threat response when our overstimulation gets so high that it's in the red zone. Like, we need to do something immediately because our nervous systems are completely overloaded. Now, the solution to this is to learn how to expand your capacity to be part of the world and to do it in your way as a highly sensitive person. You don't have to be in the world as much as other people are in order to get the same benefits, the same connection, the same experiences and juicy, joyful, just input that you want to have. And you don't have to have as much of it, or you might be able to do it in shorter bursts and still get the same benefits. And you do that in 3 different ways. Step 1 is to plan and prepare in advance. Step 2 is to be aware and to have presence with yourself during the whole event and to know, step 3, when you need to pause and take a break or when it's time for your graceful exit. I want you to think about something that overstimulates you, and I want you to try these steps. I want you to prepare in advance, try and set expectations as much as possible, to be aware in the moment of what you need and to not disassociate or disconnect from yourself, and to have a plan for how you're going to take breaks or how you're going to exit gracefully so that you don't overstimulate yourself and you don't escalate to a point where you're behaving in a way that doesn't feel like you. Now, if you like what I am talking about today and you want some more help with this, I am taking one-on-one coaching clients right now for 3 and 6-month engagements. And this is for you if you really want deep support. You want to process with someone who very, very strongly understands where you're coming from as a highly sensitive person, and who also believes that just because you have high sensitivity doesn't mean that your life is suddenly limited. It does not have to be a barrier to you living the way that you want and to creating the life and the business of your dreams. I was one of those people who had every single one of these mistakes. And now I have just this amazing life that I can't even believe that I get to live, even though it's still a work in progress, even though I still have goals for my business. I still have financial goals. I still have debt I'm cleaning up. I still have side gigs. I'm still learning about my relationships all the time, but I get to do it my way. I get to show up the way that I want. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I would be comfortable being on YouTube or publishing a podcast talking about my experience as a highly sensitive person, I would have been overstimulated and I would have run away for a couple of weeks until I felt comfortable coming out of my hidey hole. And now this is just what I do. I love sharing this information. So if that inspires you, and if you want to build a life with your high sensitivity that you really love too, then I would love to work with you. Go to my website, stephanielynn.com, Linn. That'll be at the end of the episode and in the show notes so that you can learn more, and book a call with me. Just have a quick conversation. It's just a half an hour of your time to talk about how we can work together, if I'm a good fit for you. And if I think that I can't help you, I will genuinely be honest and refer you to someone that I think would be a better fit. Now, I have 2 more announcements too, really quick, just to wrap up the episode. The first one is that I have a workshop, which will be, by the time you're listening to this, airing today, March 27th, 2024. That's Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And even if you can't make this live, because I know a lot of you who reach out to me have day jobs where you might not necessarily be able to sneak away for an hour at 3 p.m., I would love it if you sign up anyway, because the replay will still be available through this coming Sunday, March 31st, 2024. I'm also working out some ways where you might be able to access some of these workshops that I'm recording as well. But it is worth it because the workshop is how to feel your feels as a highly sensitive person. This is crucial. It's crucial for procrastination, for people pleasing, for overstimulation. It's really relevant for the stuff that I've been talking about recently because we as highly sensitive people are often afraid of our own emotions. we feel so intensely. We pick up other people's emotions and we sometimes don't know how to put them down. And because we feel so intensely, a lot of times, many of us resist those emotions. And so they escalate. They turn from molehills into mountains in our minds, and we start snapping at our loved ones. We start walking away from them and avoiding them because we don't know how to handle difficult conversations or any kind of conflict at all. We keep ourselves small. We don't share our voices. We are afraid to be out in the world because we are afraid of the emotional stimulation that might come up when we are being highly sensitive people and we don't know how to handle our own emotions. So if this sounds like you, I want you to come to class. I want you to get the replay. And I want this for you because in this 1 hour, you are going to walk away with actionable steps right now to start expanding your capacity to feel uncomfortable feelings and to feel a little bit more discomfort without it overwhelming you. You can make better choices already about how you're showing up in the world, and you can feel like you're always in control of your emotions, no matter how intense they are, and you're never acting in a way that you regret later or wish that you'd done differently. Again, that is today, if you're listening to this live, March 27th, 2024 at 3 p.m. Eastern, and the replay will be available for the next 4 days until midnight on Sunday, March 31st, going into Monday. So that's 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And the whole reason I'm really excited about this workshop is because it is kicking off a new 6-week course that I will be launching for the next 2 weeks only. And this is a small group course, only 10 people available for this very intimate coaching experience. And it's called Emotional Alchemy, Transforming Overwhelm into Connection and Confidence for the Highly Sensitive. Because that's exactly what this 6-week course is intended to do. It's to take you from this overwhelmed, overstimulated state to help you really connect with your emotions and to feel them with confidence so that you, as a highly sensitive person, can thrive in your life and show up the way that you want to, regardless of how you're feeling. Because your high sensitivity is a gift. And when you're not constantly feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated and you're not getting empathy fatigue, then you can actually be the person that you want to be and do the things that you want to do so that you can have the life that you really want to have. Over the 6 weeks, I will be covering how to separate and pause before you behave in a way that you don't want to behave. So when you start to escalate in your emotions, you're stopping that response where you immediately react to things. You're going to learn how to separate your emotions from your thoughts and to actually choose your emotions intentionally. I'm going to teach you how to separate your emotional state from other people's emotional state, which is huge for highly sensitive people because we have so much empathy for others and we tend to be very affected by the people around us. And then I'm going to teach you especially how to design the kind of emotional life that you would like to have so that you always feel confident and in control of your emotional states, whether they're positive or negative emotions. And I will teach you ways to build habits, ways to build rituals, ways to build affirmations and mantras, and ways to literally change your mindset so that you can accept and become aware of your own emotions and often use them to your own advantage if you're not being present with them in the first place. Because the more we resist our emotions, the more intense they become, especially for highly sensitive people. So if this interests you, I do have early bird pricing until Sunday, and then the price will be going up to full. So if you want to learn more, and if you're interested in hopping in at the early bird price, definitely go to stephanielynn.com and click on the Work With Me tab so that you can learn more. That's what I have for today's episode. That was quite a few announcements and a lot about overstimulation, but I hope you got a lot out of this episode and you're already feeling like you're more prepared to be in the world just with the information that I've shared with you today. You can be in the world. It doesn't have to pass you by unless you let it. Thank you for listening and for watching, and I will see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to take what you learned today to the next level, head over to stephanielynn, that's LINN.com, and book a consultation call to get started. I can't wait to see you there, my dear HSP.